Good afternoon, everyone. This is Anvita B.V. Gowda, a research assistant, and I work for Swabhimaan. Swabhimaan is an initiative under Center for New Economic Studies based on exploring the intersectionality of gender across the discourse of development studies, social policy, and entrepreneurship. Today, we will be discussing the role of agency of women in conflict-ridden areas. So in this interview, we shall be particularly focusing on Kashmir, which has been the place of conflict for several decades now. Today, we have with us Professor Priyanka Khushwah, Assistant Professor at Jindal Global University, who has worked closely with the people of Kashmir in understanding and aiding women who have been subject to violence. It would be better heard if from the professor herself. So could you please tell us about the work that you were engaged in Kashmir?
Hi, Anvita. Thank you for the introduction. So I graduated in 2018 and I had two opportunities in front of me. Either I could choose for Gandhi Fellowship or I could go and work in Kashmir. I had a previous internship with the same organization when I was in fourth year, which is Jammu and Kashmir Civil Coalition Society. I had a brief interaction with the other organization, which was Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons. I liked their work, so I decided to go and work there immediately after my graduation. And I would say it was a very beautiful and learning experience for me. That 1.5 year was quite good. After that, I went to pursue my masters, but I learned a lot during my 1.5 year at Kashmir. I traveled the entire valley, met people, learned about their hardships, try to pursue them for the litigation, brief certain matters for the organization, both Jammu and Kashmir Civil Coalition Society and Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons. Had a wonderful experience while working in Kashmir. Amrita, you are not audible to me.
I'm sorry. What was your line of work in Kashmir? Like, what did you focus on?
Okay, so I was focusing on two areas. First, disappearance cases and cases which involve sexual violence or sexual offenses.
Mm-hmm. That's
So,
that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
no, you were saying.
No, I was just like moving on to the next issue, but please continue.
Okay, so I was working with both the organization at the same time. So both the organizations work in very different areas. At Jammu and Kashmir Civil Coalition Society, it has different areas. So my main area was cases related to sexual offences. Whereas at Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons, my only focus was on those cases where people have been disappeared, no FIR was filed, the family didn't know about them. They want to pursue litigation further. The family want to know about what happened about their whereabouts. So that way, I was focusing on these two areas.
So I believe that you've noticed several cultural and societal norms that have hindered the survivors' ability to share their experiences, right? And even to access support. Can you please elaborate on that?
Okay, so when I was working with JKCCS, there were cases where women have faced sexual violence. So, but with me, they were comfortable in discussing what happened, how they feel about it. There was no discussion on mental health back then. People were not discussing about their trauma. They wanted to suppress the entire issue, not because the one thing I learned, they didn't want to suppress the issue because they thought that their loose status in the society or they would hamper their image. But the main reason was they believe that they'll not get the justice. It's irrelevant, it's not feasible, and it's not fruitful for them to go and pursue litigation for next couple of years because they know that nothing good will come out of that. The result would be uh, more harmful for the entire family if they go and pursue the litigation because in most cases uh, the accused was within the system. So this one thing I learned and about the community, about the religious. So most of the women come from a particular religion, which is Islam. I must say, I was very skeptical before going to Kashmir. So I tell you, when I went to Jammu, My bus immediately got cancelled, and it was very difficult for me to reach to Srinagar from Jammu. So I took a local cab where I had to travel with 10 other men, local men in the same cab. So I felt safe. I felt safe when I was sitting with locals. So there was a time there was snow, so a local family provided me shelter, and I felt safe. They knew how to respect their women. They knew they consider their voice, they give them the enough space where they can talk about what happened with them. And the most important part, because it happened with so many women within a particular sphere, there was a community belongingness within those within that proximity where women from each family know that something has happened to the other woman and they'll be there for them. So they were open, they were comfortable while talking about it when they were with other women. They didn't feel any sort of problem or any sort of a stigma attached to it when they were talking about it. The only thing was they gave up on the system. They realized that nothing is going to come out if that's why they don't want to pursue it. Because the cases were so much in number, and they realized that it's not, they won't get anything good out of it.
So I just want to want you to elaborate on this part where they were comfortable about talking about it to you and everything. So how in India I'm not sure about I cannot comment on the other nations, but how women are often viewed as an object of conflict rather than warriors, and a lot of narratives, they have been viewed as passive victims rather than active agents, right? So women's role in effort in peace building and most post conflict reconstruction are not paid heed to. So how do you think sexual violences influence their involvement in these processes? Have they raised their voice against this? If you have any experiences from Kashmir.
I just have a year and a half experience. The cases I dealt with, that's true. We do use women as objects, especially in conflict areas. So, for an example, if a person from a family go towards militancy, this means that the entire family is vulnerable now, especially the women, because they are already marginalized within the community. They face more trauma. They face more violence. Now, when it comes to decision making process, I would say in conflict areas, women do lack enough opportunities and enough support where they could be part of decision making process, because in the men in their family, the family members are so scared for them to go out. Even if they want them to go out, they want them to go out of the conflict areas. They don't want them to study and work within the conflict areas because they're scared of their for their women. They are very protective. So even if they do get opportunities, they choose to go out and raise their voices there, and not many of them would come back and work for the society. So I think what I would suggest is that even if as the person I would go out, I would come back and work with community. Obviously, there is a obviously there'll be I'll be scared for myself, where I'll be vulnerable in situations where I was, but someone has to come and raise their voices. But right now, that's not the thing in Kashmir, and especially in present scenario, it's not. People are too scared. They're too protective of their women. They don't want them to raise their voices in Kashmir. And those who want, which are very rare in number, belong to the upper class families. And you know how the class system works in our society. They feel a little protected, but and then again, their thought process should align with the ideology of the current politics going on in Kashmir. So, impact or a change to the voice of women has to come, but it's going to take a lot of time because they're too scared.
So I wanted to I want you to elaborate on the security force that is most expected in places of conflict areas. How does militarization of conflict areas influence the prevalence of sexual violence against women. And I'm curious to understand whether there has been any contribution from the security force itself to combat this issue.
Okay. So, when I went to before going to Kashmir, I had a prejudice that the security, the forces are the reason why the people are suffering in Kashmir. But when I went there, when I saw them, I would say that there's nothing is black and white. One
Mhm.
thing I realized was there was officials, there were people from army who were very supportive, who were very thoughtful, and they were dutiful. They didn't do anything which I would say that they were misusing their powers. But there were also cases which I come across where I would say there was instances when it did happen. But more than the army or the security forces, what I realized was the corruption and the problem within the system where the local police was involved. So there's a in different power dynamic which works in Kashmir. So people who are there in the conflict area, some of them enjoy power because of the existence of conflict. So they don't want that conflict to get over because at the end of the day, they won't have enough power. So they want the conflict to be there. People who are from Kashmir, people who are living in Kashmir. And there are people who are living in Kashmir, they are so vulnerable, they are badly impacted by the entire conflict. They want this conflict to end, but they don't have enough voice, they can't do much. So when it comes to security or when it comes to forces, there's nothing black or white where I could give you an answer that the forces are the reason. Forces, what I really think is the system in which Kashmiris are also part of that system. This system is the main reason why women in conflict areas are suffering more than the other areas of the country.
Hmm. Hmm. So previously you mentioned about how you used to advocate for for legal recourse and everything. So do you think the legal mechanism and the justice system have been effective in addressing cases of sexual violence against women?
There was a reason why I chose not to work anymore and I chose to pursue my master's because I realized one thing that even at the end, the organization, all the organization, not just mine, the organization are working to end the conflict or to end the issue, but not going to create much of a difference because if the conflict ends, the entire existence of the organization would would end. It would not serve good for them also, right? That's the first thing. Second thing about the legal system or litigation is concerned, um, it, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. It's a traumatic experience. Um, so I'll give you an example with the experience of mine. So I met a woman who was 21 years old, about to get married, but his brother flew away a couple of months ago and joined militancy. This was the rumor; it wasn't proved. So the local police has this suspicion that maybe he's part of the militancy. So when it comes to militants, when it comes to militancy, normal legal procedures don't apply. They would apply different laws, know that, right? So in that case, they have more power in their hand. What they used to do is they used to come at 2 o'clock in night. They used to come at 3 p.m. They used to beat the family members. They used to beat the women. They used to commit sexual offenses with them. And all they were doing is to fetch information. The woman was so traumatized. The woman who was 21-year old was about to get married. The in-laws came to know about the entire situation. They broke the marriage. She was traumatized with the entire event. She didn't want to go and pursue her studies. Where the organization's role was there, we had a conversation with her. After a couple of sessions where we provided her therapy, she started going to attend school, attend college. She started her education again, and it took us almost 5 months to convince her to go and file the FIR and pursue litigation. She's still pursuing that litigation. The case is still ongoing. It's going to take time. It's a time-taking process. It's a lot of patience. It takes away your energy. The next point is, what else? There's no other option. This is the last resort. So we can't give up on it. So imagine if everyone gives up on the process because it's time taking and they don't know the result. There's a probability that nothing good comes out of it, but there's also a probability that they will get the justice. But if we lose from the very start and if we don't pursue litigation, there will be 100% probability that nothing is going to happen, and these offenses, these violence will keep happening with other women also. So suppose in 10, so if out of 10, if there are two cases where we get justice, so that's enough for them to at least have a hope, and it's enough for the people in the system or the police forces to fear a little bit so that they won't commit these violations, these violence. I think the litigation should go on. But yeah, there are other mechanisms which we can do which could help out these women, like providing them um, some rehabilitation, providing them some compensation, or providing them some support in the form of therapy, in the form of education, in the form of legal support, that they can move on and start their life. They can live their life while pursuing this litigation. Because imagine women, most of the families depends upon either transportation or farming or tourism for their bread and butter, right? Where these three areas are where men take the charge. Women doesn't. Women are not much employed there. So imagine a woman who's not financially independent. How will she go and pursue litigation? She's dependent upon someone else's permission or someone else's decision to go and pursue litigation. That's one of the problems with women in conflict areas. If she's financially independent, she'll take charge and she can pursue litigation, because at the end of the day, the violence was committed against her. And she suffered that trauma. She knows how this entire incident has affected her. So what we can do is we can provide some support that she can come out, raise her voice.
So, you talked about militancy and how women in the family where the men are, dragged away to the militancy struggles even more. So, would you like to elaborate on the situation of like a single mother there or with children and how they have to carry on with no experience, work experience, or no education or no financial background to work in places like that.
I met a lot of single mothers, not because their partners or their family members went for militancy, but some of them died during soul pelting. Some of them died because there was police firing,
Mhm.
and they are left with no other option to do menial work to feed for their family. They either work on apple orchards, they work on someone else's farm, they go and work in hotels. But there are very less opportunity for women in Kashmir to go and work, because because of the religion is such where women don't come out in open much. There's a parda system where she doesn't come out in front of men. Otherwise, she'll be looking in a very different manner. So there are very less work opportunities for a single mother. So
Mhm.
either she go and stay with her maternal family where she's dependent upon some other male who's a father, who's a brother, and because she's dependent on someone else, she loses her voice. And the kids also suffer. But I haven't. This situation is very different. Here, we can see a lot of single mothers working and providing for their children, but that's not the case in Kashmir.
Yeah.
Here, I won't give the credit. I won't give the credit for the conflict, but I give the credit for the religious barriers.
So I came across this article that talked about half widows, right? So when a person goes missing, the women will have to wait for 7 years to get the
Yeah.
funds and how do you think that works there? How has this been?
That's your Indian Penal Code says, no?
Yes.
That's your Indian Penal Code.
Yes.
That is Hindu Marriage Act says. So even if you want to, so forget about religious barriers. Even if you want to go by law to take a divorce, you have to wait for 7 years. Then only you can say that the person is dead.
Yes.
That's the first thing. And second thing, there it's very difficult for a woman to remarry. Most of them don't, what I've seen. Most of them choose to go and live with their maternal families and they don't get remarried. Or for an example, if they have kids, 7 years is long enough time for the child to grow up and they would end up not marrying. And for or otherwise, if the woman is childless, 7 years, yeah, she has to wait. There is no other option.
Hmm.
But
So,
that's what law says.
yeah. So how
So
has
I personally think that this should not be the case. Because in the conflict areas where people are dying, like every fourth day, waiting for someone for 7 years is, especially for a woman who's dependent on any other male family member, who's not educated, who's not financially independent, for her waiting for 7 years to get remarried causes a lot many other issues.
how do you think the inheritance rights has been affected in those areas, if you remember any cases as such?
Yeah, so what I saw was women don't inherit much of the property.
Mm.
Men who inherit most of the properties because of the conflict, because of the sexual violence, women are very vulnerable, and most of the male family members don't want them to go out, or if they want them to, if they even if they are going out, so there's a class system. Okay, women from a upper class, women from a middle class, and women from a lower class. Women from a lower class, they got married at a very early age. The moment she steps out, she gets some amount in she gets some amount during her marriage, and she loses the property. Women in middle class families, they pursue their schooling till they pursue their education till schooling, not even graduation. They're schooling. After then, they get married and they live with their family. But they don't inherit the property from the husband also. And women of the upper class, they choose to go out of Kashmir and study mostly in medicine. That's one thing I learned. They want to study medicine. So either come to Delhi or either they go to Pakistan and pursue their education, and then they get married and they do inherit property. But most of the women in Kashmir don't inherit their property much because properties in Kashmir are usually in shape of farm. They have apple orchards, they have farms. So then and so there is a lot of family belongingness which I saw in Kashmir. Women don't even want to inherit the property. Because if something happened to their husband or their partner, the maternal family would immediately pitch in and help them out. They would take the responsibility and they have this surety that the maternal family would come and take that responsibility. Which is why I never saw a woman um, demand of property or would want to take the charge of the property because at the end of the day, they are not they don't have a habit of being independent. They don't have a habit of being a property owner. They are habitual of being dependent on someone else. So they would rather being a dependent on male member rather than owning a property.
So, from your stay in Kashmir, do you think there needs to be a policy change or a legal change that needs to be brought that hasn't been yet?
So I've seen Muslim women in other parts of the country, and I've seen Muslim women in Kashmir, and I think there's a need to bring good education and good employment opportunities in Kashmir so that they can learn from their education in financial independence and raise their voices. I think Kashmir, there's a lot of requirement for development in Kashmir. So imagine a area from Uttar Pradesh or Bihar from 1950s or 1960s, right? What imagine my mother. My mother was a housewife. She didn't have much say in the family. Any other woman during 1950s or 1960s who was not much educated, she was just graduate and just she would rather marry someone else or someone and raise a family. But now, when we are educated, we are financially independent, we have a right to take our own decision in our life, whether we want to work, whether we want to have kids, whether we want to marry, whether don't want to marry, whether I want to marry a girl, I want to marry a man, I want to adopt. I can make those choices because I am not financially dependent on anyone. So, in spite of just bringing any other law or any other policy, I think the change should be in ground level. It should be in actions where you bring education opportunities for them, you bring employment opportunities from them for them. So I understand that they can't work in tourism, they can't work in farms, and then they can't work in transportation, but there should be other employment opportunities for them where they can work like small scale industry, where women are working in different parts of the country. So if they're given enough employment opportunities, they'll gain that confidence where they could say that, see, I don't want to marry, but I want to study further. So I think that's what we need in conflict areas.
So from the interview, I gained like a really good insight into some of the. Thank you for sharing the stories of lives in Kashmir. I think that would like really contribute to our study. And thank you so much for joining with us today.
Thank you so much, Advita.